This sermon is the second in our series on half-truths, things we think are in the Bible but are not. Last week, Colleen, in what has become known as the quilt sermon, preached on everything happens for a reason. This week is God helps those who help themselves. Next week is God gives us nothing more than we can handle. The following week is God says it, I believe it, that settles it. And then the final week is love the sinner but hate the sin. One of the things that bothers me about all of these half-truths is that they seem to be discussion enders. That people use these lines and that's it. That's the conclusion. There's no point saying anything else. God helps those who help themselves. End of discussion. God said it, I believe it, that settles it. End of discussion. Okay, so this week is God helps those who help themselves. When Jay Leno had the Tonight Show, he had a segment on the show called Jaywalking, where they'd go out into the street and ask people questions. And one of the questions people were asked was, can you name the 10 Commandments? It was striking how many people said one of the 10 Commandments was, God helps those who help themselves. A Barna Study, which is a religious research group, said 8 out of 10 Americans believe that phrase is in the Bible. And majority believe it is one of the major tenets of faith. God helps those who help themselves. It's not in the Bible. The closest we can get to it is what Layla read in the first reading from 2 Thessalonians. Paul is addressing laziness and busybodies in the church in Thessalonica. And he's talking about people who don't think they have to work. And he says, if you don't work, you don't eat. And that has become extrapolated into God helps those who help themselves. The phrase doesn't come from the Bible. It comes from Poor Richard's Almanac. And Richard's Almanac is almost an American Bible of these sayings that many of us were brought up on. A stitch in time saves 9, hates make away, and things like that we kind of live by. And God helps those who help themselves is kind of American. I mean, it's about self-sufficiency, about the self-made person. It's about, pulling yourself up by your bootstraps. That's, we hear those kind of phrases all the time. You made your bed, now lie in it. It's stuff like that. Well, there is some truth in God helps those who help themselves. We know that sometimes we just have to get off our duff and do something and get moving. That job isn't just going to fall out of the sky. We've got to get resumes out there. We've got to start networking. We've got to start working if we want results. I'm struck by some athletes that make their sport look so easy. LeBron James, Steph Curry, Tom Brady. And then you read how hard they work, how they're the hardest workers on their team. They arrive early for practice and leave late. They're the last ones on the field. These people, they're helping themselves be success. I remember all the stuff my coaches used to tell me, winning is 10% inspiration and 90% perspiration, stuff like that. So there is some truth to God helps those who help themselves. Now what's interesting is, so that statement is about a third true. It's interesting that passage from 2 Thessalonians ends by saying, after it says those who don't work, don't eat, then it says to the church, don't tire of doing good. don't tire of helping. So even that passage, switches a little bit. And it's a strong theme in the Bible to help others. The Old Testament is full of passages about helping the widow, the orphan, the immigrant, the sojourner. In the New Testament, Jesus talks, about when you've done it unto the least of these, you've done it unto me. So help the thirsty, help the hungry, help the naked, help the homeless, help the lonely. It's all about help. And the Good Samaritan is about helping that person by the side of the road. It's all through Jesus' teaching about the Christian obligation to help other people. Jesus didn't say God helps those who help themselves. He talked about helping your neighbor. Mr. Rogers, in an interview, was talking about children who are exposed to violence on TV and in their life. And he said that when he was growing up and there would be a movie or TV show on that had some violence in it, and he was scared, and he'd go to his mother. His mother's solution to violence was, Fred, look for the helpers. Look for the helpers. And she said, you'll always see helpers. And I thought, what a great thing to say to a child. Look for the helpers. You'll always see helpers. Focus on that. And it's interesting, in the parable of the Good Samaritan, Jesus devotes one verse to the violence that happened to the man and 3 verses to the helper. Look for the helper. Look for the helpers. So the statement is only half true because the Bible and Jesus tell us, and the prophets tell us to help others. But it's really only a third true, because there are times where we cannot help ourselves, and we turn to God for help. And the Psalms are full of this. In my distress, I called to the Lord. In my illness, I called to the Lord. I lift my eyes to the Lord, to the hills. From where does my help come? My help comes from the Lord. So there are times we cannot help ourselves, and we need help. I mean, this is kind of the cornerstone of 12-step programs, which are other help programs, really. Alcohol made my life unmanageable. So I turned my life over to my higher power. I cannot help myself. God help me. So, that's basically the sermon, and it basically ends here. But help is a concept that might not be as simple as just helping somebody. Help goes in a lot of directions. We entertained the staff Friday night, and it's me. Susan does all the work, and Susan couldn't do it with my help. But what I do for Susan is I run errands. She'll say, I'm out of sugar. Go get sugar. I need butter. Go. And she never remembers it all at once. It's good. Yeah. And sometime in Friday afternoon, as I was driving back from the store, and I thought, I'm really enjoying this. I'm really enjoying helping her. And I thought, helping is a good thing. And I thought, I feel useful. And helping, We like to help because we do feel useful. We feel like we count. We feel like we matter. When our kids want to help us, don't they? Because it's their way of learning how to do things, and it's their way of learning that they matter in this world. And so often, we'll say, oh, this project needs help. And we get help, and then we don't have anything for people to do. And it's like, they didn't need me. They didn't need my help. So helping is really important in our lives because it does something to us. And then at the same time, helping can be problematic. Sometimes are we helping somebody or are we abetting somebody? Are we helping an immigrant or are we abetting an immigrant? What are we doing? And sometimes when we help, are we enabling somebody and we shouldn't be helping them? I told a story a while back of my friend when I was in graduate school who was going through a very rough spot in his life, and I'd go over every Saturday night and drink with him. And I thought I was really helping him. And all I was doing was enabling his alcoholism. I wasn't helping him at all. So helping is not really as simple because we have to look at the results of what the helping will be. And there are times in our life where we want help and we don't get it. We'll even ask for it, and we feel like that person has just shut us down. And in a way, sometimes when we say God helps those who help themselves, is a way of shutting down the other person. And there are other times where I don't ask for help and I get it. And I'm irritated by that. And there are other times where I don't ask for help and somebody butts in and helps me, and it's one of the most important things in my life that they've seen the issue that I didn't see, and they've helped me. They've intervened. And there are other times where helping is controlling. The sunny side of help is control. And often we've been on the receiving end of help where we feel like we've just been flat out manipulated. So helping can be very complex. And sometimes when we help, we can do more damage than good. What is easier for us? To help or to receive help? Well, helping can be a risk. It can be a sacrifice. The Good Samaritan took a risk. Did the Good Samaritan know that the man lying by the side of the road might have been a decoy to draw him over so he could get mugged? He took a risk. And he sacrificed. It says he gave at least 2 days' wages to help this wounded man. Helping takes trust that the situation will work out. You don't know. That's one of the issues with refugees. It's a risk. It's a trust. It's a sacrifice. We're putting ourselves out there. And Jesus says, the Good Samaritan had compassion. What that word really means is he was moved in his bowels. He felt it in his gut. And sometimes helping affects us. We feel it in our gut. We have compassion. So helping sometimes isn't as easy as we think. It's not just writing a check. It's a commitment. And I think Jesus is saying true helping is this commitment and this giving of ourselves. But receiving help is hard. Receiving help is admitting that I'm not as wonderful as I think I am, that I'm not as smart as I think I am, that I'm not self-sufficient. I need help. It's saying I don't have all the answers. And just like giving help is humbling and risk-taking and a sacrifice, so is receiving help. I don't like being indebted. When I think about receiving and giving help, there are two sides of the same coin. And that coin is grace. It takes grace to give, to think of the other person, and it certainly takes grace to receive. What's harder, picking up the check or letting the other person pay? Chris always lets me pick up the check. Yeah. Both take grace, don't they? Both take grace, because both are letting the other person in your life. And that's what grace is. In Mexico, some of you who have gone to Mexico have experienced Ricardo. Ricardo is the house father for the orphans. And it's quite clear that the orphans are very dependent on Ricardo and Carla's giving to them. And, you know, they look to Ricardo and Carla, his wife, for, you know, food and clothing and shelter and rides to school and rides to the doctor and hugs and love and you know, and prayer. They look to Ricardo and Carla for everything, you know, because Ricardo and Carla are givers and they understand the grace of giving. And Ricardo and Carla literally cry over the children when they're hurt. Week before we went to the orphanage this year, Ricardo and Carla's house burned to the ground. We got there a week after the fire. It had all been cleaned up. They and their 3 children were living in 3 small rooms in the orphanage. And it was fascinating watching Ricardo's reaction. He just, you know, he said, it was only things. And I am so thankful to God that nobody was hurt, the fire didn't spread to the orphanage, and none of the children were hurt. And Ricardo, whose life is about giving, was so grateful to me when we gave some excess money from our trip to him to help him buy some clothes. I got tired of seeing him in the same outfit. You know, and he was so thankful. He couldn't stop saying thank you. And when we painted those 3 rooms at the orphanage, he couldn't stop saying thank you to us. And I thought, and he wasn't humiliated. He didn't feel controlled. He just gladly accepted what we were giving him. And I thought, here is a man whose heart is full of grace. He understands that the life of faith is about giving and receiving, because he understands what grace is. The Bible does say this: it is more blessed to give than to receive. But I also think at times it's more blessed to receive than to give. Because isn't our life about receiving God's grace, about receiving community, about receiving life, about receiving what other people do for us? Isn't it about that grace as well as it is about the grace of giving? So, yeah, we give to other people. We give to God. We give to ourselves. And we receive from other people, and we receive from God. God helps those who help themselves isn't in a Bible. in the Bible, even though a majority of people say it's one of the major tenets of our faith. But what is in the Bible and is a major tenet of our faith is grace. The grace of giving and the grace of receiving. May it be so. Amen.